Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 293. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have back with us the internationally acclaimed and talented comic creator of Plugo Arts, Patrick Lugo.
I'm pausing for applause. Thank you, Barney, for having me back. I feel like we've only just been hanging out casually, and now I'm back on the main stage. So
well, it's all right because I've been on your show I think a couple times. You've been on, and it's weird that we talk to each other all the time, and you've only been on the show once. It just seems like it just doesn't seem like the math adds up. But I had to check again. You've only been a guest on the show once.
it's purely my own fault because I moved through life in such an improvisational fashion that, like I forced my friends to really kind of contort to like, okay, I can fit you in within a specific time frame, But I like to think of it as like I like to say it's the monkey in me, right? Like when they're swinging from vine to vine, they're not really scheduling exactly which vine they're gonna grab. They're just kind of reaching out and, hoping that there's a vine that they catch before they go all the way down, right? So
right.
I like to think of it
is that
that
your
way.
year of the zodiac? Are you year of the monkey? Is that?
Yes, according to the lunar calendar, lunar zodiac, yes, I'm an earth monkey. So
Okay.
it's the earth that mellows me out,
Right. Yeah. And I remember last time we talked about I'm a dragon, so I got that going for me. So
Yeah, that explains your magnanimity. Like you're magnanimous and you've got that like people flock to you, I've been lucky to meet a few dragons and they're always like a presence, So
yeah. Yeah, so, sometimes it's not really like that the presence you're hoping for, but it's something.
yeah, exactly, right? There's Smog and then there's Puff, right? And there's a
Right.
whole
See?
spectrum of dragons in between.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And both
But
of
I
them
don't know.
kind of
I
have
don't know
this
how
like
many.
smoky, Puff and Smog. You pick two that actually kind of have this.
Purely coincidence, Barney.
See? I'm more of like Whiff the dragon, I guess.
Yeah, or
Not quite a
Sick,
Puff.
right?
Yeah. See?
Because I noticed you had a beverage in your hand. Does that happen to be tea? And of what
Of
sort?
course it's tea. It's a yogi tea as well. See?
Oh,
Yeah.
very nice. I pulled out my trusty tea box because I wanted to share
Oh yeah.
some tea cakes with you because we have an ongoing conversation about tea, right?
Of course. Yeah.
And so I wanted to mention that the tea that I'm drinking now is called Elevensies, right? And hey, there's a dragon connection here somewhere because Elevensies is a play on the on Hobbit food culture, right? If you
Right.
recall, Hobbits
Yeah.
eat like they have
Second
breakfast,
yeah.
second breakfast, Elevensies. And so here, let's see if I have that. This is which I illustrated this in 2020. It's a break of pu'er tea, which is fermented tea.
I love pu'er tea.
Yeah, and that's what I'm drinking right now because I just came to the end of a brick.
I've discovered the whole in the cup steeper that you can actually put in for the loose tea, and I ended up really falling in love with something like that. And what I love about tea is that with coffee you have flavored coffee, and then decaffeinated coffee. What I love about tea is that you can get different flavors of tea. You can have different types of herbals teas. It is the sky's the limit. Hibiscus tea you could have, which is good for you. You can have, as you said, the pu'er teas, the green teas, the white teas, the black teas. And I don't remember if I was telling you this on your show. It's like when I was working in Zimbabwe for years, and we actually drove through a tea plantation that we worked at as a health clinic. And that's where I learned that green tea, white tea, and black tea are all the same leaf. It's the same plant. It's when it's harvested. is what the type of that tea is. So like the black tea is like the real leaves there, and then the green tea are the new leaves, and then the white tea is like the baby leaves that are popping up on the top of the bush. So
Yeah, and then it goes a layer deeper, right? Because you also get like an oolong tea
yep,
based on how it's cooked and
right,
prepared. And then the pu'er tea is similar and it's how it's aged, right? So, and then now when you talk about aged and fermented teas, you're almost kind of going into wine territory because
yep,
you can get these tea cakes that like are, this
yeah,
year and this was a good year harvest, right? So you may have heard those kind of comments with certain year vintages of wine, but also like you can get teas that are aged 30, 80, 60 years old, and then there's a commensurate value and quality to those teas as well.
yeah,
So like,
right, yeah. And it's
well,
so
for my
hard because
birthday.
there's it's so and the tricky part about that is like if you buy a bottle of wine, you don't have to prepare it. It's there in the thing. But if you buy a pu'er tea, you really have to know how you're going to prepare it because you can for the uninitiated, you could burn it. You could actually put in hot water too much. You can actually steep it not long enough, and it can really harm the flavor of it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's once again it's that whole scale. The scale goes in every direction. So like
Right.
I have two tea gurus, right? Two tea masters, senseis or friends,
Yeah.
who they like, one of which, hired me to do that tea label. He actually followed up with a second tea label. Uh this one is called Second Breakfast. Do you see a theme here?
Yeah.
So I'm really stoked on this one because he went full color, right? He went from black and white to color, but it's still the same characters. And it's also a purer tea, but a different mix, right? Like different leaves from different generations. So if I was to open it up, you would see the dark cake with a little in the lighter colored speckles in it. And
Right.
it's, and then once again, when I'm hanging out with my tea mentor, he's got it dialed to an art, and it's
Right.
amazing how many steepings you can get, and there's a whole experience to it.
Right.
But then I'm more of he makes fun of me. He calls it grandpa style because what I do is I just have a pot with a basket and I put a lot in it and just steep a whole large amount. And then I
Right.
have my trusty thermos that I pour it into, which keeps it warm all day, and that's how I could just keep, sipping on my tea while I'm at the art table. And,
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't set up the space and do the whole meditative aspect. I'd love to, but Barney, I've got deadlines to meet. So I just need that motivation.
I know. And so yeah, before we went live, we were talking about how you kind of stick to like a 27-hour schedule, a 27-hour day.
Something like that. Or it kind of was, I was being a little facetious, but it's also like the chaos of my organic sleep schedule. Like once I've been
Right.
liberated from the commute and like the standard 9 to 5, you know, I can pursue my efforts in accordance with my motivation and my energy. And sometimes what I have found is like, people spend a lot of time trying to sleep, but not really sleeping, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I've just decided I'm not going to try to sleep. When I'm tired enough to sleep, it's going to happen. And then when I'm not, if I've rolled around in my bed more than once, I might as well just go out for a midnight walk with the dog, and then log a couple of hours in at the computer, and then I'll feel it. Okay, time to go to sleep. Then I'll go to sleep.
Right. Now, did I remember? Did I tell you that when I was in Niger, we had drinking the Tuareg tea? I told you about the Tuareg tea.
Is that when you spin it around and it sweetens over time? Or so I'm really paraphrasing it extremely, but that the impression I have is the tea is on the end of a string that's being swung around, and that's how the
Almost. So what they do is they have this little thing where it's actually kind of like a small grill, basically, where they put the charcoal in. but they have to
Mhm.
make sure it's heated up. So what they do is, to make sure it's nice and hot, they actually like grab the charcoal base, the thing where they heat it on, and they spin it around to get it burning. Then they set it down, and they have a teapot. So what they do is they open up a packet of, like, it's called gunpowder tea. Are you familiar with that term? Like, it's um
Yes.
bullet is basically little tiny rolled up tea balls, and it's mixed in.
Hmm.
It has a Moroccan mint to it. And so what they do is they pour in one sachet basically of tea, and then they put in one sachet of sugar, and they put it in, and they put in a 16-ounce glass of water. They dump it in, and they heat it up, and then they cook it, and then they have these little shot glasses, and then when they pour the tea, they pour it really high so it cools off a bit as it goes in, and that's the first round. So that first round of tea, you drink it, and it's really bitter. Like, it is, it's bitter. It's really bitter, and they say that first round of tea is bitter like love. And then what they do is then they do a second round where they don't add any more tea, but they add in another thing of sugar. So they basically take another sachet of sugar, put it in, put another 16-ounce cup of water on there, heat it up, spin it around. And all this time, you're just hanging out and talking, telling stories, because the entire process takes about maybe 2 hours if you're lucky. Usually it goes longer. So then they spin it around, set it up, and then do another shot of tea. And it's not and then it's when you drink it, um it's not as bitter because it's not as strong with the tea. But they say, the second round is like strong like life or something like that, or bitter like life. No, the first one is strong like love. The second one is bitter like life. And you drink that, and you get it done, and then you do the third round where they don't add any more tea. You still have that one sachet on, but then what they do is they add in another sachet of sugar, put another 16 ounces of cat water in there, close it up, and get it all heated up, spin the coals around and stuff, and then they drink it again. They do the whole pour it real up high and stuff and give it to you. And the third round, they say, is sweet like death, and it is sugar. Basically, it's like sugar water because you can barely taste tea at that point because it's the third round. They never add any more tea on there, and the entire process, there's theater and performance and just storytelling because you're hanging around and you're watching like an artisan work on making this tea, and it is some of the most amazing stuff you can do. It's so fun just hanging out and doing that. And I remember taking back with me when I left the Peace Corps, and I brought back my own Tuareg tea set. And I made it once for my family because the uh, that the theater behind it is actually pouring the tea high and getting the coals going and stuff like that. But it's not a hard art form to mess up because the ingredients is pretty simple. It's tea and water and sugar, but it's how you do it. It's actually the ritual behind it is the actual heart, the part to make sure you get down pretty good. But yeah, that was fun because what the tea is kind of specific, as I say, it's the bullet tea with mint. So you have that in the Moroccan mint on it as well to kind of give it some of that flavor to it. So yeah.
What's also interesting about that, because I love that story, but there's similar parallels in terms of like the number of steepings and how like the tea, I think it's been described as like when you just steep it and it's really light, that's like the heaven aspects. And then as you steep it and it gets darker and darker, it's the earth aspects. So it descends from heaven to earth. Whereas at the bottom, at the dregs and the most bitterest stuff, that's, the earth.
Right. Yeah.
But speaking to one of my other people that I know who's written books on tea, and he gave me an interesting spin about how tea and colonialism kind of interacted. Like we all kind of might
Okay.
remember the English colonialism going to China, trading in tea, right? All the tea in China, the Boxer Rebellion when China tried to fight back and get England, or the British Tea Corporation, I think it might be called, who was using the tea and engage in colonialism. And one of the factors that they did because of that rebellion was that they stole tea plants and brought them to other British colonies in India and in Africa. And that's how the tea that originally started in the mountains of China made their way to these other continents. So if you were to ask someone who specializes in the Chinese tea, those rituals like the one that you described, as well as the use of milk and sugar, were a response to the new teas that were coming in from other colonies because they couldn't get the original tasting tea that had been discovered in China. So
yeah, that's right. Because I know when I was in some of the British the British colonized African countries, they had no, it was in Pakistan. When I lived in Pakistan, they had the milk tea, which was just basically it was just milk and sugar and then it was just some tea flavor to it. But that was super sweet stuff too. Yeah.
Right. Well, you think about that was a stop on the Silk Road, and those tea, right? Those teas, specifically tea dochas, like the bullets or the small little cakes, that was currency for those stops. So yeah, amazing. One plant, and a whole range of histories and uses and flavors.
Right. Yeah, in different parts of the world, like you have the tea there, then was it like tobacco from North America, and coffee came from South America, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think actually coffee came from Africa and then went to South America with Spanish colonization.
Right.
Because I think coffee made its way from Africa north through also on the Silk Road, and it had its whole impact on the on the early stages of Islam, where it had to be addressed, right? The prohibition of alcohol. Did coffee qualify?
Right. That's right. So coffee originated in Ethiopia is the standard. Yeah. Yeah. And in coffee actually is a nut. A lot of people think it's a bean, but it's actually a nut. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the peanut that's a bean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I know from when I did volunteer work in Africa.
Yeah. So Patrick, I wanted to talk to you about I really want to also kind of talk a bit about your latest book, which is different. It's kind of a different adventure than you have with a Tiger's Tail. It's I want to make sure I say it right. Lucy Veloz.
Yes. Like Velocity. So Lucy Veloz, the high flying princess. This is a special little project. I am not the originator of the concept. This is a collaborative work wherein the writer is a longtime friend and collaborator, and he had me, help develop this project because he had this vision for a young sci-fi superhero princess that was also of Latinx origins, right? I couldn't say she was from Latin America because this is a sci-fi world, a whole new planet where she's the princess of. But it's rather than being a graphic novel, it's more of a storybook, right? Small chapters for the young reader, ages around 6 through 8, who want to see the adventures of a Latina princess who saves herself through her inventiveness.
And so it's not necessarily it's almost like an illustrated storybook in a way, right? Is that?
Yes. Okay. That's a good way of describing it. It's kind of written for youngsters who want to read for themselves, right? So that was Alex's vision. Alex Hernandez, the author. We were also he was one of the editors for the anthology that I was a part of called Speculative Fiction for Dreamers. And also in tandem with that, he had presented this concept, as a story, but he wanted it to be so immersive that he wanted the comic book aesthetic to be really present, right? So we created this this really comic book-ish fantasy sci-fi setting for a young princess to have crazy adventures in. And so this is the first adventure where it's a classic tale of her saving her planet from interplanetary invaders by the creative use of her invention.
And how was this? How was illustrating this book different than when, like, with your Tiger Tales kids comic?
Rather than just draw a scene, you know, like you'd have to do with a comic, I wanted to really like create a whole world in one scene. In some of my other updates, I kind of went into details of like how that wallpaper was created and added, you know, I created like a 3D space so that that wallpaper could recede in accurate 3D, even though there's a kind of a fantastical lens flare effect where you can see the floor and the ceiling of the room at the same time. So it was like these kind of things, which, you know, when you're trying to generate comic pages, you don't really have as much time to really plot out these like nuances, you know. And then so like if you see the inventions that are strewn throughout the room, each one of those inventions is an individual illustration. You know, on the page opposite it, you can see her, let's name that her air visionoscope something something invention, right? Like you see it spotlighted on one page, but then you also see it just as one item in her many inventions, just in her bed, in her messy bedroom, you know. And so, and then the same is true with like the pattern of her bed and her cat, you know, her bed, those that also has a bit of a history. You know, there's a lot of these little elements that kind of create the character in just that one image, you know. And that's something that you don't often get to do in comics because you're, you know, you're depicting things for the purposes of telling a story, whereas here I'm telling a story through the images that I'm depicting. You know, like you can barely even see it, but the on that techno screen that she's looking at is one of the first comics that the author Alex Hernandez and I worked on. So you'd have to, you know, this is a digital image, but like in the printed book, you can kind of look really closely and you'd be able to see, oh, there's a little comic sequence going on because that's a comic that Alex and I worked on many years ago. You know, I wanted to bring back to once again, you know, convey that there's a deeper story here. So each of those illustrations has that kind of effort put into it, you know, in terms of some of it has been drawn, you know, pen and ink on paper. Some of it was digitally created using 3D tools and models. You know, some of it looks very real, and some of it looks like maybe it's my take on Dr. Seuss and some of those influences that affected me when I was young. So I wanted to kind of bring some of that into like a redefine what sci-fi might look like for a youngster, you know.
How much did Alex give you on the say, go ahead and just invent any images you want? Or did he say, I want to make sure there's an anti-gravity belt? Or did you say like a sky screen? Or did you were able to, was there some level of science and expectation that Alex had for you? Or did, because you worked together with him on projects before, he just said, just, you know, draw what you want, Patrick, your stuff is fine?
Well, you know, there were specific items that pertained to the story, right? The anti-gravity belt, the laser boots, and the solar wings. These were things that he wrote about, and you know, they have an effect on the story as it's being told. Outside of that, he provided a series of Pinterest pages where he was like, these are my ideas of like what I'm thinking in terms of like a sci-fi hero, and this is my ideas of what I'd like in terms of sci-fi technology. And in fact, if you were to go to that, you know, that crowdfunder page, I think I wrote a little post. One of my very first updates was just like screen captures of those Pinterest pages, you know, that featured, you know, iconic characters like Astro Boy, and there was some Kirby tech. Like, we have a lot very similar tastes to begin with, and you know, a lot of similar interests, or what was it, influences. So that we were already simpatico on that level. And then once he sent me those Pinterest boards, I sent him a few sketches that were just ideas of what I'm thinking, for the series, like the style. We went back and forth on you can even play that little video up there if you wanted, but like some of those things I just kind of presented to him generally. There was another full page illustration that I went deep on in terms of like the 3D of the architecture and the perspective of the city, right? I'm trying to invent
Right.
an idealistic sci-fi city that goes a little bit beyond, what is already out there. And Alex,
Right.
I would send Alex developmental sketches and some developmental art. Like what I did was I drew a few key scenes, and then we just went back and forth. Like I knew I wanted to introduce Lucy upside down floating in her bedroom. That's like one of the key scenes in the opening of the story, and it just was so fun to draw. So before I
Right.
can get to that finished piece, there was one drawing where she was wearing a much more traditional princess gown, like the one you see her mother wearing, on the
Right.
floor. But then I kind of changed it to be more of a jumper kind of suit because it tied into her sci-fi pajamas, and it just moved her forward, and it also made it easier to resolve the issue of her being upside down, playing with her anti-gravity belt if she was wearing a jumpsuit rather than a skirt. So it's that kind of thinking. And here's another example of an initial image that showed like ideas about what the city could look like without
Right.
relying on the typical um, blues and silvers that people associate with like high-tech environments.
Now, is this a series or this is a standalone book?
The book is a standalone book. I know Alex has a few other stories that he's written, and it definitely it functions as an origin story in this case, right? This is the origin of how a young idealistic princess, becomes a hero, a young
Mhm.
idealistic hero. And so from there, there's room to grow. Like each story is designed to be like a little bit of a lesson, but I think that's
Okay.
part of what we want to try and convey with the project. I've got other. The whole platform is an interesting experiment. So once again, Lucy Veloz being like an inventor and an experimenter, I thought would be the perfect project to bring to a new platform where I'm experimenting and inventing a kind of a different way to crowdfund and get my projects out there.
Now, so who's the book for?
Oh, the ideal reader will be a young. I think the ideal reader will be a youngster, age 6 through 8, and
Hmm.
the parents of such children, right? Curious. They might have ideas of being inventive. There might be a young girl who wants to be a superhero, and there's still room for one more young female superhero in the
Right.
world. So I like to think that I'm targeting this book to the cool aunts and uncles that I know, right? Like we finished the book as an ebook, and so the plan is just to send the plan is to send the files out to the printer by the end of this month, right?
Okay.
And then have the books in people's hands well before the holiday season, right? So I've
Right.
kind of I'm framing this as I think this will be a great gift. This will be a chance for kids to step away from the screen or from the tablet and to have an actual book in their hand that is sized appropriately for their hands so that they can carry it with them in their backpacks. And at the same time, my other books are also there in case you want to like catch up and build your library, right? I've got copies of A Tiger's Tale Volume 2. I've got copies of my little mini comic Zong Q. That one is a short, quick little kung fu action. I've got some of the stickers that I designed for A Tiger's Tale. Like the and then a few of the my award-winning children's book, right?
Right.
Who I've got some copies, so I you know, if people want to buy one of those, I'll paint a little something inside of it to kind of really make it unique. And the idea is that this is, once again, the cool aunt and uncle who wants their kids to read more, right?
Right.
That's what I want this
Yeah.
project to do, right? Encourage
Right.
more literacy. So when of them, A Tiger's Tale Volume 1 is written to be read by kids, but it's also written to be read by adults to kids, right? Well, I think, you know, the same is true for Lucy Veloz, right?
Yeah, and it's like a big book. It's like 72 pages.
Right. The hardcover is going to be include some back matter, right? Like some of the stuff that I was describing in terms of like how I built a page and how I developed some of the art. Those will be specifically added into the hardcover so that
Right.
once again the inventive curious child can look in there and see, compare what, you know, what the finished artwork looks like to the previous pieces which, you know, made their way there. I devoted a large chunk of 2020 to doing this artwork, you know, when
Right.
I had this as my primary project. And so I invested it with so much thinking in terms of like what I could do, how much I can embed into an individual story, or how much story I can embed into an individual work of art.
Right.
Which is why I was able to create like a little worksheet where they could kind of play with their own spare time. They could check and compare their blueprints to Lucy's blueprints, that sort of thing. Right. I put so much energy into doing this art, like I was able to just have that available for a youngster to be able to play with. You
Right.
know, like it's those kind of experiments that I wanted this campaign to or to bring forward, and it's been fun to do so. And once again, the crowdfunder as a platform allows for some other interesting perks in terms of like the digital download aspect seems to be automatic, or there's room
Right.
to do some video calls, right? So I could use some of my own design experience and illustration experience with other young artists. This is something I do infrequently, but it's so satisfying when I could, you know, be on the other side of a video call with a young artist who's got questions and has ideas of what they want to do, but don't quite know how to get there. You know,
Right.
sometimes
Yeah.
it's very technical. Let's talk about perspective and design. Sometimes it's just very like it's very abstract, almost philosophical, you know, like what it
Right.
means to be an artist in the world. So
Perfect. So Patrick, if people want to learn more about Lucy Veloz, where can they go to?
so they can go to crowdfunder.com
Okay.
slash the high flying princess,
Okay.
and that'll lead them straight to the campaign page. I also set up luceveloz.plugoarts.com, which you could see
Okay.
it right there on my subtitle. And so that should also take you to the same place.
Right. And that's a good point too. So also check out go to plugoarts.com as well, where you can see all things Patrick, all things Plugo on here, where you actually talk about all the publications you've done, comics you've done, the books you've written and published, and of some of the articles you've done, and also amazing portfolio. So definitely check out Patrick's work because it's it's high art but accessible in an illustration sort of way, which makes it really really easy for anybody to learn and check out and appreciate your style, Patrick.
Oh, thank you, Barney. And you're catching a glimpse at the rate at which I have to work to get these projects done. I mean, we were just discussing this T label moments ago, and there it is.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Well, listen. So, Patrick, you're gonna have to come back on when you have your another project done, because being on 3 times, you get to be friend of the show. So, you get
Oh,
the official
I'm
label.
so excited. I'm like so excited to achieve that goal. I have to come up with a new project just to be able to do that.
Oh,
Um,
see?
let's see. I'll come up. I know I've got a few in the works already, so the
Right.
ideas are percolating, or should I say the ideas are steeping, because we've been talking about
Steeping. See, exactly. They're not perking. They're
people.
steeping. Yes, you got some ideas steeping right now. Yes.
I know. Yeah, ambitions for a graphic novel on the history of tea, Barney.
Right.
Wouldn't that
See.
be cool? Right.
Or you could do something where like there's like you can have like you can do this like superhero thing, and each hero is like a different type of tea or something. See, and yeah.
Oh, so many possibilities. And there's also my guide to drag. I've got a list of ideas of like, which one can I get to? But when
Right.
I
See,
reach the 30 hours a day mark, then I think I'll have all of them covered, right?
you'd be fine. Yeah. See, you
When
can
I,
do
when
it.
I can put in a 30-hour work day, then we'll
Yeah.
see some real progress.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Patrick.
Barney, this has been an honor and a pleasure just to hang out, to talk tea, as well as projects and creativity.
Right.
Did that accidentally rhyme? I'm not
I think
sure.
it did. See? Yeah. See?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, look at that.
You're so fluid with creativity. It just happens just right off the cuff like that. See? Yeah.
It's pouring out of me like an overflowing kettle. What can I say?
Yes.
But I better be careful, because I'm here sparring with the grand master of dad jokes. So my puns may not get me that far.
No, I'm more the one that like I'm not quick witted. I just have the resources to find the information. That's all.
I think some people call that wisdom, Barney.
Yeah.